Heavenly Stories.
The prison walls were cold, damp, and unforgiving. Every stone whispered the stories of despair that had come before. Yet, in the darkness of that Philippian jail, two men sat not in fear, but in hope. Paul and Silas had been beaten, their backs raw and bleeding, their bodies chained. The guards had thrown them into the inner cell, shackled their feet in stocks, and left them in silence, or so they thought. From the first strike of midnight, a sound rose, low at first, then swelling, filling the entire cell with something the walls could not contain. It was not the sound of anger, nor the cry of defeat, it was a song. Paul and Silas lifted their voices in praise. Their voices echoed off the stone, bouncing from wall to wall, carrying hope through the darkness. Outside, the other prisoners stirred, some curious, others mocking. But inside, the atmosphere shifted. The chains on their wrists felt heavy, yes, but their hearts light. Unshakably light. They sang not because their situation had improved, but because their faith had not wavered. Each note was a declaration: God is here. God is greater than fear. God is freedom, even in captivity. As the melody carried on, a strange tremor began beneath the prison floor. The chains rattled, the doors shook, and the guards ran to hold their posts. But Paul and Silas kept singing, their eyes bright with a light that came not from the flickering torch on the wall, but from the fire inside them. Every beat of their hearts became a drum of defiance against despair. This was more than a song, it was a rebellion of the soul. And the moment had only just begun. The tremor grew stronger. Stone walls groaned as if they were alive, and the ground beneath the prison quaked with an otherworldly force. Paul and Silas felt it too, but instead of fear, a profound calm settled over them. They did not stop singing. Their voices, now louder and more resolute, carried a strange authority, a supernatural rhythm that seemed to command the very foundations of the building. The other prisoners, once resigned to despair, now pressed their faces against the bars, their eyes wide with awe. Whispers floated through the corridors: "What is happening? Could this be divine?" The guards stumbled, gripping their weapons, unsure if the earth itself had turned against them. Every chain that bound Paul and Silas rattled violently, sparks of light glinting off the cold iron. Suddenly, with a thunderous crack, the prison doors burst open. The locks flew from their hinges as if unseen hands had wrenched them free. A collective gasp echoed through the cell block. Paul and Silas, still sitting upright on the cold floor, their backs scarred, their bodies bruised, looked at each other and smiled, not with relief, but with the serene confidence of men whose faith had been vindicated. The guards froze in disbelief. Some tried to flee, but the prison walls seemed to hold them in place. Outside the cell, a man, the jailer, rushed down the corridor, torch in hand, to check on the prisoners. His face, pale with fear, revealed confusion and dread. He expected chaos, blood, destruction, but what he found instead were two beaten men, singing joyfully in the darkness, chains falling loose at their feet. In that moment, something shifted inside him. A man hardened by duty, authority, and fear began to tremble, not from the shaking walls, but from a deep, gnawing realization. There was power here far greater than chains or men. There was power in faith. There was power in hope unbroken. Paul looked at him calmly, voice steady despite the echoes of the quake. "Don't harm yourself. We are all here." And for the first time that night, the jailer's heart softened. Something stirred deep within, a seed of awe, of wonder, of humility, planted by the voices of two men who had chosen joy over despair. The midnight song had become a spark, igniting not just freedom from iron, but the first glimmers of transformation in a human heart. The jailer stood frozen, torch trembling in his hand. His eyes darted between the open cell doors and the two men who sat calmly amidst the ruins of the night's chaos. Fear had gripped him, yet there was something else now, a strange, magnetic pull at the core of his soul. He had expected death, destruction, punishment. Instead, he found peace and courage radiating from men who should have been crushed beneath the weight of chains and blows. Paul stepped forward, still bruised and bloodied, yet every movement carried dignity and authority. "Do not be afraid. We are all here." His words were soft but unshakable, like the steady heartbeat of a mountain. The jailer fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the realization that these men had not only survived the night but had done so with joy and faith. What kind of God gives strength like this? The jailer thought, mind racing, heart pounding. The ground had shaken, the doors had opened, and yet these men remained calm. Their joy was contagious, a fire that burned away the cold fear in his chest. Without a word, he fell to his knees beside them, trembling, tears streaming down his face in disbelief. "What must I do to be saved?" he asked, the words barely a whisper, yet heavy with desperation. Paul looked at him, eyes full of compassion and clarity, and answered, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household." The jailer's heart thundered with hope. He could scarcely comprehend it. Salvation offered freely, through faith, not deeds, not punishment, not merit. He called for water, and together he and his household were baptized that very night, a quiet celebration of lives transformed. The chains had been broken not only on Paul and Silas, but on a man's soul, opening a doorway to faith, joy, and new beginnings. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, dawn approached. The city of Philippi slept, unaware of the miracle that had just unfolded in the quiet of a single cell. Yet the story would spread, as stories of hope always do. A tale of joy in suffering, of courage under chains, and of faith powerful enough to shake the foundations of the earth and the hearts of men. In that prison, pain had turned to praise, suffering to song, and despair to freedom. And in the hearts of Paul, Silas, and the jailer, a new light shone, the unquenchable, eternal fire of God's power and love. The first rays of dawn filtered through the barred windows, casting long lines of light across the cold, stone floor. Paul and Silas stood, stretching aching muscles and bruised backs, yet their faces shone with an inner peace that no physical pain could diminish. The prison, once a place of suffering, had become a stage for something far greater, a testament to the power of faith and joy in the darkest moments. Word of the miraculous event spread quickly through the prison and beyond. The guards who had once been filled with suspicion and fear now whispered among themselves, sharing awestruck glances and recounting the night's unexplainable events. Even the town itself would soon hear of the jailer's conversion, a story that defied reason but spoke deeply to the heart. Paul and Silas could have left quietly, slipping away to avoid further trouble. But their faith was not about escape, it was about witness. They went before the authorities, who had chained them and beaten them unjustly, and with calm authority demanded justice. "You have beaten us publicly, though we are Roman citizens, and thrown us into prison without a trial. Now come, and release us." The magistrates, fearing repercussions for their actions, trembled at the reminder of the law and the men's courage. They tried to offer apologies, yet Paul and Silas spoke with grace, turning even their suffering into testimony. Every bruise, every scar, every sleepless hour became a lesson in perseverance, joy, and unwavering trust in God's plan. As they walked out into the morning sunlight, free men once more, the city around them seemed brighter, sharper, alive with possibility. Paul and Silas had not only survived, they had triumphed. Their joy was infectious, radiating not from freedom alone, but from the knowledge that God had been with them in every strike, every chain, every lonely hour. And the jailer? He watched them leave, heart full of wonder, eyes brimming with tears. His household, baptized and saved, stood beside him, a new family united by faith rather than fear. That night's miracle had become more than liberation from a cell, it had become liberation from doubt, despair, and the chains that bind the soul. In Philippi, the story would endure, a song in the midnight hour, chains broken by faith, and joy unshakable in the heart of trial. Days passed, yet the story of the midnight miracle did not fade. In Philippi, people spoke in hushed tones about two men who had faced unimaginable suffering with courage, their song shaking the foundations of a prison and hearts alike. Paul and Silas had become more than prisoners, they had become symbols of unshakable faith and divine power at work in human lives. But the lesson went deeper than all. It was about joy in trials, a radical, almost scandalous joy that refused to bow to fear or pain. Paul and Silas had not just survived, they had celebrated in the midst of suffering. Their example revealed a truth that resonated far beyond the prison walls: joy is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of God in every moment, even the darkest. The jailer's household thrived, transformed by the faith they had witnessed. A man once hardened by fear now embraced hope, and his family followed his lead. The chains of doubt, anxiety, and despair that had bound them all were broken. In their home, laughter returned, prayers rang out, and faith became a living, breathing reality. Paul and Silas continued their mission, traveling from town to town, sharing the message that had saved them: joy and praise are powerful even in suffering, and God's presence never abandons the faithful. Their story inspired countless others to trust, to sing in the night, and to find hope in places where despair seemed absolute. In that Philippian jail, a timeless lesson had been written not on parchment, but in the hearts of men and women who had witnessed it. Faith can turn pain into praise. Chains can become instruments of testimony. And the human spirit, when anchored in God, can rise above any trial. The song of Paul and Silas did not end with the dawn, it echoed through generations, a reminder that in every struggle, in every dark hour, joy and faith can transform the impossible into the miraculous. And long after the walls had crumbled and the prison was forgotten, their song remained, a song of freedom, a song of hope, a song of unshakable trust in God. Years later, the story of Paul and Silas in the Philippian prison still resonated. Travelers spoke of the miracle, parents told their children of the midnight song, and believers everywhere were reminded that faith could shine brightest in the darkest hours. What had begun in a single cell, beneath the weight of chains and the sting of lashes, had grown into a timeless testament: God's presence transforms suffering into victory. Paul and Silas, now seasoned in trials and triumphs alike, reflected on that night often. They had learned that true strength is not in avoiding hardship, but in facing it with praise. Their chains had become a platform for a divine display, their bruises a testament to resilience, and their song a beacon of hope that outlasted the tremors of stone and steel. Every time they remembered the jailer's awestruck eyes and the baptism of his household, they saw the ripple effect of obedience and joy, a miracle not only of physical freedom but of hearts turned toward God. In Philippi, the jailer and his family became living witnesses to the power of faith in adversity. Their lives were a continuous song of gratitude, their home a sanctuary where hope was nurtured and shared. The story spread, not because of violence or spectacle, but because it revealed a principle as profound as it was simple: God's power is made perfect in weakness, His joy is found in the midst of trials, and faith, when unwavering, becomes a light that cannot be extinguished. Even centuries later, the echoes of that midnight song inspire believers across the world. In every prison of despair, every situation that seems hopeless, the example of Paul and Silas whispers a challenge: sing in the dark, rejoice in suffering, and trust in God's timing. Chains may bind the body, but they cannot touch the soul; fear may knock at the door, but it cannot enter the heart that chooses faith. And so, the legacy endures. A song of freedom, a testimony of joy in trials, and the unshakable truth that God's presence brings hope, healing, and salvation to all who trust Him. Paul and Silas taught the world that even in the most desperate circumstances, praise is powerful, faith is unstoppable, and miracles can happen when hearts remain steadfast. Their story became eternal, echoing through every age, reminding humanity that in God, even the darkest night can give way to the dawn.